Now we have the issue of Qur'anic analogies. Okay, the Quran is full of similes and metaphors and examples, and various scholars, As-Suyuti, he mentioned that Imam Shafi'i listed this branch of knowledge as being one of the requisites, the prerequisites of ijtihad. And Al-Izz ibn Abd salam, another Shafi'i scholar, he said that the similes or the metaphors which indicate a variation in reward or nullification of deeds or praise or criticism, all of those have legal implications. And Ibn al-Qayyim mentioned that there are more than 40 of these similes and metaphors in the Quran. And the Quran itself constantly makes references to this as a method of discourse. For instance, in Surah Al-Hashr, وَتِلْكَ الْأَمْثَالُ نَضْرِبُهَا لِلنَّاسِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. We coin such similitudes for mankind that perhaps they may reflect. So, amthal is the plural of mathal, which is similitude. And the Sunnah is also full of similitudes, and Imam at-Tirmidhi in particular, he devoted an entire chapter of his Sunan, consisting of more than 40 hadiths, as illustrations of that feature of the Sunnah. And some scholars, they said that these types of analogies are a form of majaz, a composite majaz, called majaz murakkab. Whatever. We're going to get into it just from a simpler kind of a classification system. The first is what we call simile in English, which is where the word like or the term example is explicitly mentioned. Example of this is like that. Those are called similes in English. And an example of that, إنما مثل الحياة الدنيا كماء أنزلناه من السماء فاختلط به نبات الأرض مما يأكل الناس والأنعام حتى إذا أخذت الأرض زخرفها وزينت وظن أهلها أنهم قادرون عليها أتاها أمرنا ليلا أو نهارا فجعلناها حصيدا كأن لم تغن بالأمس. This is in Surah Yunus, verse 24. The similitude of the life of the world is only as water, which we send down from the sky. Then the earth's growth of what men and cattle eat mingles with it, till when the earth has taken on her ornaments and is embellished, and her people deem that they are the masters thereof, or masters of her, our command comes by night or by day, and we make it as reaped corn, as if it had not flourished yesterday. So the example of the life of the world, like water being sent down. So it's quite an extended simile. And then in Surah Al-Baqarah, this is mentioned in your text. The example of the hypocrites, two examples. One is of fire and the other is of water. The first one, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. مثلهم كمثل الذي استوقد نارا فلما أضاءت ما حوله ذهب الله بنورهم وتركهم في ظلمات لا يبصرون صم بكم عمي فهم لا يرجعون. Their example is that of one who kindled a fire, but when it illuminated what was around him, Allah took away their light. So you keep getting this superimposition of the original example is the hypocrites as a group, and then you have the single individual, and the pronouns are sort of bleeding through. So to remind us of the mapping of the one onto the other. When it illuminated what was around him, Allah took away their light and left them in darkness, so they could not see. Deaf, dumb, and blind, so they will not return to the right path. And fire contains heat and light, and the hypocrites, they lit the fire, quote unquote. They entered into Islam as far as outer appearances go for the worldly benefits, but they didn't receive any light from the message. And the second simile, أو كصيب من السماء فيه ظلمات ورعد وبرق يجعلون أصابعهم في آذانهم من الصواعق حذر الموت والله محيط بالكافرين. Or like a rainstorm from the sky, within which is darkness, thunder, and lightning. They thrust their fingers in their ears against the thunderclaps for fear of death. Allah encompasses the disbelievers, verses 17 and 19, 17 to 19. So, the revelation, the flashes of the revelation are scary because they illuminate the inner thoughts of the hypocrites. So, and then, by the way, this is the example of what I forgot to note in the earlier lecture on types of majaz. When talking about referring to a part by its whole, asabi'ahum, asabi' is the plural of isba', which means finger, and it refers to the entire digit, all three digit. What are these called? These segments of the finger. So those three together are isba'. And so when Allah says that they put their asabi' in their ears, literally it would mean that they plunge them in all the way up to the knuckle. Which if you did that, it would kill you. I mean, it would drive something into your brain. So what's really meant is the enamel, when mula, the singular, they plunge those in. So there's a vividness there when you say asabi', that they're so afraid that it's as if they're about ready to drive their whole fingers into their brain. Anyway, you have this example of, you have this vivid visual image of the lightning and the darkness and illumination and then the thunderclaps. It's very picturesque. And then you have the example in Surah Al-Ra'd. I won't read the Arabic. He sends down water from the sky so that valleys flow according to their measure. Okay, here the revelation is again being compared to water, and the valleys flow according to their measure. So some people can absorb more, they get more from the revelation, and their being is larger. Some people's beings are more narrow and constricted. They're still good, they still believe, but people have different capacities to yata'amal, to interact with the revelation and to absorb it into their being and to change as a result of it. And then it says, and the flood bears on its surface swelling foam from what they smelt in the fire in order to make ornaments and tools. From what they smelt in the fire in order to make ornaments and tools rises a foam like to it. Thus Allah coins the similitude of the true and the false. Then as for the foam, it passes away as scum upon the banks, while as for what is of use to mankind, it remains in the earth. Thus Allah coins the similitudes. So the Quran is life for the hearts, just as the rain is life for the earth. And again, you have a pairing of water and fire in this simile. The fire that smelts the ornaments, that causes this foam. So some of the responses to revelation are like that foam. And that is useless, and that kind of foam just sort of vanishes after a while, and that which is beneficial remains. And Ibn Abbas, commenting on this passage, he said that the foam is doubt, while that which is beneficial for mankind is yaqeen, certainty. Then you have another type of similitude, which is a metaphor, in metaphors the terms like and similitude, none of those are mentioned. It's a straightforward mapping of one thing onto another by way of illustration. And an example of that in Surah Al-Hujurat, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولا يغتب بعضكم بعضا أيحب أحدكم أن يأكل لحم أخيه ميتا فكرهتموه. And do not backbite one another. Would one of you love to eat the flesh of his dead brother? You abhor that. So, in other words, you should also abhor the other, the backbite. That's verse 12. So, and this, majaz and similitude, they really, they flow together very much. This is an example of something known as isti'ara, borrowing an expression from one situation to illuminate another. Another example, أَيَوَدُّ أَحَدُكُمْ أَن تَكُونَ لَهُ جَنَّةٌ مِّن نَخِيلٍ وَأَعْنَابٍ تَجْرِي مِن تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ لَهُ فِيهَا مِن كُلِّ الثَّمَرَاتِ وأصابه الكبر وله ذرية ضعفاء فأصابها إعصار فيه نار فاحترقت كذلك يبين الله لكم الآيات لعلكم تتفكرون. Would any of you like to have a garden of palm trees and grapes, vines, in other words, with rivers flowing underneath it, with all kinds of fruit for him therein? And old age has stricken him, and he has feeble offspring. And a fiery whirlwind strikes it, and it is all consumed by fire. Thus Allah may explain His revelations to you in order that you may give thought. And there's a narration in Sahih al-Bukhari in which Umar, he was sitting with his companions and he quoted this verse and he said, what do you make of it? What's your interpretation? And they started saying, Allahu A'lam. And Omar, he got angry. He said, if you don't know, say I don't know. And so Ibn Abbas, he said, Allah has put something in my heart, I have something in mind about this. So Omar, he said, well, go ahead, tell us what you think. So he ventured. It's about a man who worked good deeds for a period of his life, and then Allah sent a devil to him, and he succumbed to the suggestions of that devil and busied himself with sins. Okay, and then you have some examples of similitudes which are not, they don't fall neatly into either of those previous two. An example near the end of Surah Al-Hajj, يا أيها الناس ضرب مثل فاستمعوا له إن الذين تدعون من دون الله لن تخلقوا ذبابا ولو اجتمعوا له. لن يخلقوا ذبابا ولو اجتمعوا له وإن يسلبهم الذباب شيئا لا يستنقذوه منه ضعف الطالب والمطلوب. O mankind, a similitude is coined, so pay heed to it. Indeed, those on whom you call beside Allah will never create a fly, though they combine together for the purpose. And if the fly took something from them, they could not rescue it from it. So weak are both the seeker and the sought. And the primary benefit of these amthal, these analogies and similitudes, is that they make realities easier to understand and more vivid in the mind of the listener.